hearts be always acceptable unto you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Please be seated. Our Gospels move rapidly from one action to the next. Mary and Joseph's weary trip, the 70 plus miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem, is just taken care of in one sentence. The birth of Jesus. How many of you have been part of a child's birth in some way? How many of you have heard stories of childbirth? If you've ever been a pregnant woman, you know that everyone who has given birth has a story. And they will tell it to you. And it takes more than one sentence, doesn't it? Luke does not tell us how Mary and Joseph felt about being forced to walk 70 plus miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem just because the Emperor Augustus has decided he wants to count all the people in his realm. I don't think they would have been very happy about that, do you? I read an article recently about a neuroscientist who has studied the neurological triggers for anger. And this Mary and Joseph situation covers several of them. The life or death situation. You know, childbirth in those days was not a safe thing. It was very possible that Mary would not have survived. And if she was exhausted and her bodily reserves were depleted by having to trek from one town to the next, you know, it was less likely. Protecting our families. Don't you think Joseph would have been protective of Mary and of this baby she was carrying? We know of Joseph that he was a righteous man who cared for Mary. Here was a situation he was needing to protect them on this long journey. Protecting a mate is particularly a whole separate one from protecting our families. When we feel blocked or stopped, our neurological response is anger. Joseph, I'm sure, had things he wanted to be doing those weeks other than traveling to Bethlehem. He had a living to earn. He was a carpenter. You know, you don't work, you don't eat. Your family doesn't eat. I think Joseph and Mary would have felt some anger. Mary also, we know, was sensitive to societal injustices. You know, the Magnificat has been turned into beautiful and peaceful music. But you look at the words of it, the Song of Mary in Luke. She is extolling God, her Savior. Why? Because he has scattered the proud in their conceit, and he has cast down the mighty from their thrones and has lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. Mary sounds to me like she is angry about the rich who are hogging all the food, or the mighty from their thrones who are dispensing of the lives of the lowly with one flick of their pen. Why? Why did God choose to be born into this nasty situation? Now, if this were a fairy tale, don't you think Jesus would have been born to a young woman who was described for her beauty, to a king or a prince, a feather bed? Instead, Jesus is born in a stable. To poor parents who are being pushed around by the system that they live in, who haven't been able to prepare properly. Why? Because Jesus is love. Because love came down at Christmas. Love is true love when it's there for us when we're angry, when it's there for us when we're not at our best, when it's there for us when we are feeling pushed around and frustrated and poor. God's love is there for us at the darkest times. It's there in the winter of our discontent as well as the winter of snow and ice. Before we move on and talk about shepherds and kings, let's just take a moment there in that stable with Mary and with Joseph. Because I think that before they wrapped Jesus in swaddling cloths and laid him in the manger, they would have taken some time to just snuggle. Don't you think? Don't you think that Joseph would have wrapped his arms around Mary and Mary would have held the infant Jesus to her breast and they would have just felt that love spilling out from them, that love spilling out from Jesus. That moment of peace and of love in a world that was often hard and often scary. That peace and that love didn't go away. It's there for you. It's there in your heart. It's there in God's heart for you. When the world seems hard, when our neurological anger triggers are triggered, don't have to respond with anger. And go to that place of love. Go to that place of God's compassion for us, for God's compassion for the whole world, for our neighbor. Rest there for a moment. God's gift to us, God's gift to the world. For God so loved the world, he gave his only Son,